Hello, folks. Welcome again to another episode of Alaska Leaping Forward. This is our second episode, and so I thought what I try to do here is to explain a little bit more about what the 10-year plan is, why it's important, and or at least why I think it's important, and exactly how it's made up and what we can do with it. Again, I apologize. I just was working outside and fell off my ladder, so I think I've sprained my ankle, so it might be a little rough, but I'll make it do. So anyway, what is the 10-year plan? Why is it important? Why should you care? So if so, the Pacific Environmental Management for Southeast Asia, PISMA, they put out a book called The Blue Economy. And basically, they talk about how the world changes in 10 years, how people can make a big difference and see how things are going. So, hello to all the people that are watching now. Thanks. There's a last episode I posted on our Facebook page as well as a YouTube channel we're setting up. So, that'll be a good shot. This is going to be about a half an hour long. I'm trying to keep it about half an hour long, once a week. Saturdays at 4:30, give people a chance to get an idea of what's going on. If you want to have any comments, great. I've been looking at setting up a couple of guests so that we can move forward with this. But essentially, the Blue Economy talks about using physics, permaculture, the natural world as a basis for economic realities. And so I've been studying that for the last couple of years and recognizing what can be accomplished in just 10 years, how much the world can and has transformed in the last 10 years. So essentially what I came up with the idea to put forth a 10-year transition plan. There's been transition plans talked about before, moving beyond, moving to 100% renewable energies, all of those good things. The challenge is that none of them have timelines. None of them, they have goals to set for partial, but as far as 100% renewables for all of our in-state heating, electrical, and transportation needs is not something that people have been looking at yet. And so I'm putting something forth. I don't see anybody else doing what I feel needs to be done, and I guess that's kind of how the world moves forward. I have discussed some of this with some members of the Fairbanks North Star Borough Sustainability Commission, and they thought I was being arrogant by trying to put forth a plan and stuff like that. And what I've come to realize, it's not arrogance at all. It's simply a perspective. Paradigms are, I think, an important part of reality. And people, two people can have the same experiences, look at the same information, and still decide that this isn't, they come to different conclusions. So the idea is how to make this work for a plan for everyone. So in developing, well, first of all, Alaska is a really small state. Yes, it's large geographically, but population-wise, it's really small. And I think this is important because Alaska has a lot of opportunities that a lot of the lower 48 doesn't have. And it's largely because of our small dispersed population that allows us to be an example for the rest of the world, to show how, we can leap forward and how we can be the leaders of of a fossil-free world. Now, traditionally, Alaska has been 10 years behind the rest of the world as far as adopting new technologies, and I think that we need to skip that and we need to move ahead, and we can do that by having a clear plan. So the idea of a 10-year transition plan to 100% renewable energies is to some very ambitious, to others not ambitious enough. I chose to move forward with putting together a 10-year plan because it seemed like the closest date that's far enough out that people could buy into. Let's say if we did we'd love to see it next year, but that's not realistic. And I think having that type of goal is really only going to drive people away. So what we want to do is put together a plan that people can get behind. The other thing is that they say if it hasn't been done in Alaska, it doesn't exist, and I think that's a very dangerous mentality. Certainly there are Alaskan considerations for any project or any idea, but a lot of the stuff that's being done around the world is just as applicable here as it is elsewhere. And I think that a lot of the people who are trying to keep things the way they are use that excuse simply to avoid having the conversation about why this solution is better than the ones that they're proposing us to move forward with. So essentially, the 10-year plan is based on 5 parts. Those parts are basically organizations and efforts that it's already that we're already using, and I think that this is a good place to begin the conversation. So the 5 steps are basically 5 different organizational efforts combined into one central plan, but they all build on each other. So the first step is taking a leap. In Canada, there's a document that started out called the Leap Manifesto, and basically it was about permaculture and putting forth principles to create a balance of life, and to and basically make that commitment on a personal level. And I think that's where it all needs to start. We all have to look in the mirror and we have to say, this is not what we want. We can do better. What am I going to do about it? And I think that the starting point of that is making the commitment to yourself. That's why the Leap Manifesto, I think, is so important, and why it's the first part of, or the first stage, first part of the 10-year plan, is to take that leap. So what we're trying to do is encourage everybody to read through the Leap Manifesto and sign it. On a personal level, that allows us to focus our energies onto seeking solutions. Once we have that down, then we're ready as a community to take the next step. Now, Alaskans like to do things on their own. They don't like to be told what to do. And the way I try to phrase all this is that these are tools that you can use if you choose. The second stage of the 10-year plan actually goes to those tools. In Portland, Oregon, there is a group called the Eco Districts, and essentially they've developed protocols, measures and metrics on how to measure quality of life around certain parameters on basically permaculture and how we can achieve a higher quality of life for everyone involved. So essentially, they provide a set of tools. They're not dictated to us. They're tools we can use if we choose. But they allow us to start developing metrics on figuring out exactly what we want and how we're going to get it, and how we measure our progress from here to there. So once we have those tools in place, once we know what we want to do, it's just a matter of each community coming together, developing their own plans, and then trying to share those with other people. And that's where the third step comes in. And I'm sure that most of you, or some of you, have heard of the Transition Network, a global network of individual communities that share their ideas, they share their experiences, and learn from each other. They don't dictate terms. They don't tell you what you can and cannot do. They are simply there as good neighbors, just like we are, trying to help people figure out what we can do and what those next steps are. So essentially, those are the first 3 steps, and very likely to be successful, each one of them is going to take about a year or so to try to get on the ground. Once we have established community development projects, once we've seen what works, what doesn't, we can review what we've done and learn and adjust course from there. Now, this is where we get back into the idea of the blue economy of physics rather than the invisible hand dictating our economic principles. And I think this is going to allow us to achieve a higher quality of life and to put into capitalism something that it's missing, which is a conscience. And I think that that is going to help us make the transition. But ultimately, policies go towards creating economic environments that are healthy for business. I have nothing against business. I just think that businesses have a responsibility to act with a conscience, to recognize that there's a cost beyond what they're putting out as far as their bottom line goes, and that by looking at that cost, they also recognize and see a lot of opportunity for profit that wasn't there before. So the idea is to utilize the blue economy model, and I'll try to bring it on in the next show, or put it into some of the views for the YouTube channel. But essentially, sorry, hi Elena. So that is the fourth step. It's the blue economy. And it's recognizing and introducing economic measures. Essentially, I think that what we have right now is an economy based on a really simple calculator: profit, loss, cost, gain. Now, physics dictate that there are examples in the natural world that we can use to develop generational prosperity, and I think that's where government really should look at. I think one of the challenges that we face with our current government is the fact that it's very myopic, very short term, and essentially our government is running from election cycle to election cycle. This is extremely dangerous to the continuity of our species, as well as to the continuity of our democracy. So I think we need to get back into the long-term planning, and that's the other reason for putting forth a 10-year plan. 10 years is beyond anybody's political campaign. Even the longest re-elections term out after like 8, except for Senate and stuff. But anyway, the idea here is that we progressively and succinctly and sequentially move forward on developing an economic plan. Oh, sorry, I was getting some messages. Try to disconnect that. Last time I had notifications popped up, and I was at least able to quiet those to keep this moving forward and try to get more professional. I joined a podcast group which is going to hopefully help me refine and make these presentations better as we get them out into more places. So I appreciate you sticking with us through the early stages of this development and learning about what we can do here. So the fifth stage in the 10-year plan is honestly something I think our kids are going to have to more deal with than we are. And that is a whole new paradigm for how we interact with each other and how we interact with the living planet. One of the dangers of our current system is that and this wasn't accidental, it was intentional. Back in the 1950s, Victor Lebow was a popular economist, and he basically put forth the idea, which you can see in the Story of Stuff video, that in order for us to maintain our enormously productive economy, we have to make consumption a way of life. We have to make consumption habits, holidays. It has become a form of entertainment, a form of satisfaction. We have to derive spiritual satisfaction from consumption, and he had no idea how dangerous that was, because that's caused us to live in a society now that more values loving things and using people rather than using things and loving people. Loving things and using people is a bad thing. We need to switch that around. So if consumption is a bad thing, then we need to focus on production. And how can we be a highly productive society, meet everybody's needs, and at the same time not burden future generations with our baggage, which is what our current system has done. So the fifth step is the introduction of the resource-based economy. This has been something that has been put forth by a group down in Florida, the Venus Project, for 30 years now, and basically literally just talking about redesigning our society. Now, the reason I say that this is something for our kids to grasp onto is because this is, from my perspective, this is the foundation for a Star Trek economy. Basically where material possessions are not the driving force in our life anymore. We are looking for experience, we're looking for contribution, and, we love to grow and we love to make ourselves better. And I think that's what I like about Star Trek and the whole philosophy behind working together. It's not perfect, but I think it's a lot better than where we are now, and it's an evolution of our social consciousness. And I think that our social consciousness just evolves just as much as the rest of our society and our physical evolution. So I think it's important that we have an end goal that talks about redesigning our society. We have the ability. We've had the ability for a while. But it's going to take education and it's going to take some policy changes, and it's going to take a lot of grassroots activism. So one of the reasons for putting this show together was to be able to have that function, to be able to organize around the idea of a 10-year transition plan, get people on the idea with the idea of it, and then we can figure out exactly what steps are going to work for each community. So essentially, to kind of recap for those who are just joining us, this is the second episode of a podcast that I put together called Alaska Leaping Forward. Its purpose is to discuss and keep the community updated on how we progress across this. I put it together and with support from the Green Party of Alaska, but it's also been put forth as part of our core function of the Alliance for Reason and Knowledge, which is a grassroots organization I established here in 2011 for the purpose of insulating and isolating Alaska from the effects of a rapidly changing climate. We import 95% of our food. We have very little production in the state, and I think these are very dangerous to the challenges that we face with long-term supply disruption, which we face every winter. And we don't have a plan for that. And that's going to cause a lot of suffering, and I think this is something we can address. So I put together and have been advocating for and trying to get people to sign on with a 10-year transition plan to 100% renewable energies for electricity, heating, and transportation needs. And I think that in Alaska we can do this if we have the political and social will. And that's what I'm hoping that this podcast will help generate, is some more interest in stuff like this. And people like Elena and Stephanie can reach out to their friends and let them know. And I can send brochures. We have some print material, and trying to get this out to more people. But essentially, so 10-year plan, 5 stages. The LEAP, using the eco-districts protocols, sharing our stories with the Transition Network, building a new economic foundation based on natural principles and stewardship, which is the blue economy, and then finally transitioning, having a serious discussion about what does the future look like, how close to the Venus Project or resource-based economy can we get? Do we want to get? There's a lot of things I like about the Venus Project and the resource-based economy, and some things I don't like. What I like most about it and why I keep it as a focus is simply that it provides a vision of the future of all our higher selves, beyond war, beyond poverty, and I think that's something that we've talked about. We would like to see, we just don't know how. But it's going to take time. It took us 3 generations or more to get where we're at, and it's going to take a couple generations of concentrated effort in order for us to be able to move forward. But I think we can. I think for our children we should, and I think that we must. And so that's why I'm here doing this. And I have a tripod for this, but with my foot, I'm not going to be able to do that today. So I apologize for the shakiness, but I'm doing best. And that's what I think people need to understand the most. Nothing's perfect, and we're never going to have 100% right answers to everything. The role of an advocate is to do the best you can, or to do all the good you can where you're at with what you have. If you've done that, at the end of the day, you should do nothing but pat yourself on the back. If you've learned from your mistakes, pat yourself on the back. If you're trying and you fail, pat yourself on the back. Brush yourself off. Get up. Try again. That's how we got a light bulb. That's how we got most of the information and the technology that we have now. And I think that one of the things that we as individuals can do to combat consumption is to promote production. Now, whether that's production on the scale of, being active in the community, growing your own food, or just sharing ideas out there, getting involved in grassroots activities. These are all important, and they all move us forward. Thank you, Stephanie. It's my honor to serve. I'm doing my best to be a light. And I think for me, that's the purpose in life, is we're all here to shine. And I think that we should. So that's what we're trying to do here. That's what I'm trying to do here. If I can't find sunshine, I'll make my own. So anyway, the idea of the transition plan and this 10-year plan is to try to get communities behind it. There are a few resolutions that we're working to put together. Basically, food security resolutions, energy independence resolutions. Still trying to find some good language for a zero waste industry resolution. But just like with the LEAP, the LEAP manifesto is something that we can do on an individual level. It doesn't require anyone else. And I think that's important. Then the resolutions allow us to begin working as a community and working with our existing governmental system. Hi, Heather. So glad everybody's been able to join us. This is something that we're hoping to grow. This is the second episode for Alaska Leaping Forward. And it's about the 10-year transition plan and to try to keep people updated and to get them involved in what's going on. So I've kind of wrapped things up, and I've got about 10 more minutes, and I would love to I'd love to get some feedback from folks on what their questions might be or what their thoughts. And I'm trying to read the comments here. Yeah, well, these kind of things need to get repeated over and over again, and that's why I'm making the video, because once this goes live, I'll upload it to my Facebook to the YouTube channel, and then people can share it and watch it at their leisure. I chose a Sunday afternoon as the best time for people to try to be engaged, and hopefully as more people realize that we'll be here every week, they'll be included to tune in, and I'm hoping to have some questions. My recording studio is my wonderful Samsung Galaxy 9, and so what that means is that hopefully other shows will be in other locations. I'll be able to do interviews with people, have guests on, the regular podcast kind of stuff. But for now, I just want to let people know what's going on, and try to continue communicating and creating a space for the conversation to happen about how we make this transition to 100% renewable energy. And I think that not only can we, I think it's important that we have that communication and we have that goal, because I think it's going to be the biggest thing to unlock our economy. Can you imagine how many businesses could come to Alaska if the cost of energy was nothing? Can you imagine the people that could live here if the cost of energy was nothing, and how the cost of energy translates in everything from the quality of life to the cost of living? And that's what we need to do. We need to reverse things, and we have the skills, we have the technology, we can do this. What we need, and what I'm trying to do, is to rally the political will. I'm not going after Democrats, I'm not going after Republicans, I'm going after red-blooded humans, and recognizing that that foundation is what we all have in common, and what we have in common is far more important than what divides us. And I think that's extremely important, because that's where we're at right now. We're in a very divided country. This whole idea of Democrats versus Republicans is crazy as far as I'm concerned, and as far as not addressing any of the real issues of the people, because it's constantly a battle for power. It's constantly one group trying to be dominant over another. And that is not what democracy is. And I've seen it from both sides. So I'm taking my message directly to the people. Thanks for all the loves and the likes. I'm doing my very best with what resources I have, and I hope that you can join me. So I'm hoping that the folks that are viewing this will take the time to check out the LEAP Manifesto. It did start in Canada, but I believe there's groups now in the U.S. and other parts of the world. After that's over, thanks, Mark. So I want this to be an interactive forum, and it's going to start out slow like most things. But hi, Diana. And I just want everybody to know that I'll be here, and I hope that you can join me too. So again, and kind of recap, my name is Robert Shields. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Reason and Knowledge, and an active member of the Alaska Green Party, or Green Party of Alaska, however you want to put it. I want to see us do better. I recognize that the change starts with the man in the mirror, so this is part of my contribution to service. And essentially, this is the Alaska Leaping Forward podcast, discussing the 10-year plan on how we move Alaska as a leader of the fossil-free world to 100% renewable energy for electrical, heating, and transportation needs in the next 10 years. So next week, we'll talk a little bit more about each step. Maybe I'll just take the next week and talk about the leap and go into that and see if I can't find a guest to have that conversation with. So I'm going to sign off a little early here. I'm trying to keep these down to half an hour, but I want to cut them out a little early so that as I put them on the podcast and able to get more things, we can have music and other things like that. So anyway, thank you all for joining us again this week, and we'll hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, stay beautiful.